Sprinterization, sectorization and rationalization are three things that enthusiasts dislike on BR. But 1990 was much more than just that. Highlight for us was the return of Tamworth Castle, seen here on the Rystone Cowboy, run by Glen Campbell fans Hertfordshire Rail Tours. D7672 had started out in life in February 1967, and when withdrawal came in January 1984, its demise was complete. Well, not quite. Thanks to Tyseley, a repaint, and later reclassification to become a long-life 25/9. Withdrawal again in March 1987, but the rat lives on thanks to Hallbeck, Type 2 superstar. Oh, by the way, there are a pair of 31s on the back. The return of Tamworth Castle was only one subject in the perpetually changing scene of BR. This tape covers 1990s BR news. This is the tape of the year. In 1990, the arrival of two new classes predominantly captured the headlines, or more to the point, their non-arrival. Rail freight had the Class 60 and Provincial the 158, the super sprinter. This is Unit 704, less than a week after delivery, on test on the Midland Main Line. Provincial had originally received the first unit in October 1989, and had hoped to introduce the 158s from January 1990, initially on ScotRail services. This was put back to May, as BREL requested a new production contract after problems beyond their control. In the event, no units entered service until September. This is 158732, passing the doomed Derby locomotive works. As Provincial wisely refused to create timetables around promised delivery dates, the national papers received a leaked letter from BR's project manager to BREL listing 100 faults on the first unit and accusing them of garden shed engineering. More problems followed, including the non-activation of track circuits. Modifications were made, and towards the end of the year, deliveries were more frequent. In the end, Provincial customers did receive a much improved unit. The class had visited most of the network by the end of the year, Unit 714 acting as a gauging train and fitted with cameras. Here she works along the Waterloo-Exeter route, which will see NSE variants of the class. By the end of the year, only services north of the border had received members of the class, with their introduction across the Pennines the next priority. The late delivery, production was over a year behind at the press launch, prevented 156s being cascaded onto shorter routes and 150/1, 2s and Pacers replacing the heritage fleet of DMUs and local hauled trains. The expense of maintaining DMUs and locomotives was at least partially offset by enthusiasts taking full advantage of possibly the last year of Class 20 passenger services to Skegness. The area manager at Derby introduced an additional weekday service throughout the summer, allegedly unknown to management at regional level until it was reported in Rail. The two Toton-based 20s were provided by Derby Shed, who did much to save face for Provincial between July and October, providing members of the class as sprinter replacements top and tail for some Matlock trains. More loco haulage was required throughout the summer on Network Northwest services. The two Oldham Loop Blackpool trains were regularly 31/4s, on this occasion with a full NSE rake. Newton Heath Depot, after 3 years of speculation over its future, has at last received a reprieve. Virtually guaranteed 31/4 haulage was on the Liverpool-Manchester Barrow services throughout the year. On this occasion, General User 412 was in action. Despite the problems surrounding the delivery of 158s, their belated appearance in Scotland released 156s for settled Carlisle duties. From October, all services were sprinters. These next 5 shots show the variety of loco haulage over the long drag in the summer and autumn. The service had been predominantly Class 31 since May 1990, when 47s were replaced. However, at Acegill, we view another northbound train descending from the summit with generator 47418. The diesel repair program for 1990-91 listed all 7 of the remaining batch of 20 pre-production 47s as to be withdrawn. In the event, only 406 and 407 failed to survive the year. This is 413. The Intercity East Coast allocated 413, 417 and 418 made numerous outings over the S&C, although the sprinterization of the route reduced their regular work to the Bradford-Leeds drags and has put their survival in major doubt. BR claimed the S&C now has its best ever passenger service, initially using 3-car 156s, which can be increased to 4-car in the summer. Also possible is a heritage train using traditional coaching stock. In 1990, 3 major new liveries were introduced. Parcel Sector 47533 is one of the few Post Office Red 47s not to be named. During the year, the Post Office pulled out of weekend operation. This, of course, will mean more parcels machines on rail tours and holiday reliefs. The S&C was definitely the place to be in September. Not only were loco-hauled passenger trains about to be replaced by sprinters, but for the first time since 1983, there were regular freight operations. Carlisle-based 60006 Great Gable was on crew training duty as 47558 Mayflower expired at Horton in Ribblesdale on the 1047 leads to Carlisle. The construction liveried 60 was summoned to take over. Sid Jordan was among the lucky few to witness the inaugural run of a Class 60 on a passenger train. BR, in fact, didn't even own the engine at the time. Some doubt exists over the 47's fault. It was the last possible opportunity for the 60 to come to the rescue. A Dutch 31 took over for the rest of the roster. From a line which was sprinterized to one which lost its sprinters in 1990. DMUs and loco-hauled stock took over from the sprinters between Westbury and Weymouth when the latter were found to be not activating track circuits between Castle Carey and Yeovil Pen Mill. an emergency timetable was substituted with a shuttle service to Westbury, covered in depth in Uk Vhs 5. A Derby lightweight was in use on this occasion. Services returned to normal on August the 20th. Another interesting working to Weymouth started in May to the South Coast resort from Cardiff via Southampton, returning to South Wales via Yeovil or vice versa. On this occasion, 47624, a parcels machine, ascends Bincombe Bank. May also saw the reintroduction of passenger services using Trowell Junction. Provincial rerouted most of its Anglia to North West services via Syston and Loughborough, avoiding Grantham, and in so doing, relieving Provincial of maintenance payments to Stoke Bank's slow lines. Unfortunately, the gained revenue from Loughborough did not match lost revenue from Grantham. Will we see a U-turn? Another route to rejoin the passenger network was to Clitheroe, featured in Uk Vhs 5. A Saturdays-only service linked the Ribble Valley tourist trap with Blackburn and Preston throughout the summer, with a Dalesrail S&C service on Sundays. A similar service was again operated on the Eastgate branch to Stanhope, although this was summer Sundays only. On this occasion, a Heaton 143 was in use. Both these lines are principally cement routes. One service which has had a gloomy future of late is the 20-mile stretch of line between Gainsborough Central and Barnetby on the Sheffield-Cleethorpes service, although some hope was forthcoming this year. The immediate threat of withdrawal of service was lifted as BR negotiated further with Lincolnshire County Council. The basic 3 trains each way service remains. This is the 0759 ex-Sheffield with a Class 108. Also claimed new territory operating into Hampshire for the first time on a day-to-day basis. An interesting pair of services between Bristol and Southampton began with the summer timetable. A DMU and DEMU both going off-region, more in the NSE section. Among the biggest DMU news was the cascading of Strathclyde DMUs south of the border. Chester Depot has created a livery hybrid of this 101 duo. Tyseley also received Metro Camel units from Scotland in the May changes. This is Tyseley set TO78. Regarded as only short-term moves to eliminate 104s and 110s south of the border, the units weren't repainted. A few miles away, Bromsgrove has a new number, 2, and a new platform opened as part of the Lickey Incline 150th celebrations. The Birmingham-Cardiff service has been diverted away from Kidderminster, saving 12 minutes. 156s predominate. 155s are gradually visiting Hunslet-Berkeley for conversion to single-car Class 153s. The only new station this year on the Western is at Whirl, near Weston-super-Mare. It was hoped to have used a second-hand footbridge from Bristol city centre, but it was found to be too short. The final cost was around £700,000, 300,000 more than originally quoted. Opened on the 24th of September, the bill was met jointly between Avon County Council and BR. Bristol-based Derby Lightweight heads for Weston-super-Mare. Earlier the same day, we visited Cardiff City Line extension, opened in 1987. BR is undergoing an awareness campaign to save the ailing service. The new section to Radder, opened as an addition to the already open Corriton branch, is coming to the end of its Speller Act 3-year trial, a similar situation to the Corby line. The local council is not the most rail-minded in South Wales and is very likely to pull out. One thing that has gone in 1990 is Grimsby's Friargate Crossing box, gone up in smoke. Situated between Grimsby Station and Littlefield Crossing, the signals are now controlled by the adjoining boxes, although by the end of the year, colour lights are imminent. Unusually, a West Yorkshire 144 was working the Barton-on-Humber to Cleethorpes service on this occasion. Hardly dedicated traction. Previously well documented in Railscene 12 and Newsviews 1, this section of line still retains 5 crossing boxes in addition to Marsh Junction box. Engineering work during September between Garden Street at the east end of Grimsby Station and Pasture Street has extended the single-track section from Cleethorpes all the way into Grimsby. One 150-103 will have to get to Cleethorpes before the next train is due to depart. A few minutes later, a Gainsborough-Sheffield service passes. Note the former trackbird of the Great Northern Line, to Louth and the south. Fortunately, in recent years, station openings and reopening outnumber closures. Although still open at the end of the year, 2 northeast stations are very close to the edge. The BR board has applied to close both Greatham and Grangetown, the former seen with a Heaton 143, complete with hybrid set number, often caters for no more than 2 passengers a day. Pacer problems in the northeast, although not as serious as in previous years, did encourage the Tyne and Wear Passenger Transport Authority from withholding £50,000 from BR's Section 20 grant from the £700,000 it provides to subsidise the Sunderland to Newcastle stretch of this route. No doubt if this station were in the PTA area, it would survive. Grangetown is south of the Tees on the Saltburn route and is also unstaffed. Here, a former Western Region skipper, by now more at home in the northeast, arrives from the east. Both stations apparently have an adequate bus service, although this one is actually 3/4 of a mile away from any population. On the 3rd of December, Provincial metamorphosed into regional railways, a new BR business sector. Provincial is no more. It has ceased to be. Network Southeast's year started badly. A government report at the end of 1989 required the sector to be self-financing by 1992. Cutbacks at local government level brought an end to passenger services to Corby, a bitter blow for the area after Chris Green had assured its future in the opening weeks of the new decade. Remember April the 13th, 1987? Celebrations included a banner detonators, a Scots piper, a suitably mournful Bletchley 108 worked on the last day. Corby Council had been very enthusiastic, contributing £76,000 to the reopening, but were forced to withdraw support in an effort to keep down the community charge. NSE were unable to continue a loss-making service, so the end came on June the 2nd. The Speller Act enables a station to open on an experimental basis and close without the traditionally lengthy closure procedure. How long before an experimental reopening becomes permanent is a question that remains unanswered. Provincial's proposed Swindon-Peterborough service is the only hope for Corby. BR's traditional DMU fleet suffered major withdrawals during the year, with Provincial and NSE standardising on Metro Camel Class 101s, Derby lightweights and high-density suburban stock. The attractive Birmingham Railway and Carriage Works designs suffered worst. Calder Valley 110s vanished in April, and NSE's barking Gospel Oak shuttle became the last stronghold for 104s. Old Oak Commons L704 surprised everyone. The sprightly 33-year-old receiving a full repaint at Doncaster Works in surely its last full year. "13 Class 50s were not so lucky. This is Centurion. Archive material, a 50 on service in Cornwall. It was finally withdrawn in August after a power unit defect stopped her 9 months earlier. Only 24 of the class remained beyond 1990. Indomitable, surviving until December before a main generator fault, the Achilles heel of the class, sidelined her. As the last Portsmouth-Plymouth train of the summer disappears, we view the last Hastings DEMU 203001. St Leonard's became surplus to requirements with the introduction of the Solent Link electrics and consequent relocation of Eastleigh's displaced units. The only other DEMU withdrawal in May was Oxted Unit 207011. They now cohabit. Kent was the principal county celebrating the Battle of Britain's 50th anniversary. Festivities included the naming of Electro Diesel 73109 and its repainting into network livery, a first for the class. 2 days later, she was employed on a Southampton-Waterloo service with a 9TC formation. The TCs had a traumatic year, and despite their unquestionable flexibility, major withdrawals occurred. The 5-coach example was unique. 3-coach formations were also formed as NSE created the 6 reps, although these only included the motor coach from the original reps. The immaculate ED, with its slightly tactless number, lasted only a short time before it was in the wars with fire damage. She was flying again in no time. Further up the LSWR's main line, 2 hybrid 483s are seen on test. The new Isle of Wight units will introduce London Transport's 1930s modernisation plans to the island. 005's 2 cars face each other in this formation. We witnessed one of the most surprising movements of the year at Barnes. Apparently, if you film here, you have to film the station cat, Roger the Dodger, who is a little wary of trains since his tale of woe. 5 vehicles of the replaced island stock were saved for a London Transport heritage train, and, more surprisingly, worked between Fratton and East Wimbledon under their own power. Ryde Depot repainted two of the cars in 1932 and 1923 underground liveries before their trip to the mainland. The complete pre-1938 set was handed over to LUL at Morden in November. This has to be among the movements of 1990. Roger wasn't impressed. The Southeastern Division had its own wacky movement, but this was daily. A complete ban on the washing plants at Ashford, Ramsgate, Gillingham, St Leonard's and Eastbourne resulted at first in much hand washing. A bold but automatic move saw redundant MLVs hauling 45-ton TTAs from the BR-owned water supply in Dover. NSE's customers can relax in comfort as the blue rinse is given priority. Another strange working on the Southern was the marriage made in Eastleigh, mentioned earlier. This is the town's new hybrid Sandite unit, including Oxted 207011 and part of the Green Hastings unit. Overton is, of course, on NSE's dreaded Table 145 Waterloo-Exeter route. The line in 90 suffered chronic loco and stock shortages. This is glorious Network Southeast on a borrowed 40C. Both Glorious and Dauntless survived the year. Here, the latter powers through Winchester on a weekend diversion. Earlier the same day, 47284, a distribution Duff, replaces the booked 50. Less than half of the original fleet of Class 50s would survive the year. Replacements were predominantly 47 or 33s. One of the more surprising substitutions saw 56035 on passenger duty. The 56, formerly Taff Merthyr, was borrowed from its freight and sent to Waterloo, returning on the 1640 service, seen here shunting its stock before resuming its booked working. Class 33s were often called upon to guest. The entire remaining push-pull fleet was, at the time, owned by the engineers. Here, 116, sporting the former departmental, now general user livery, replaces the booked DEMU, as shortages of 207s and 205s were becoming critical. No regular booked passenger work exists for the Class 33s. However, they also saw use on the Kenny Bell. On this occasion, 109 deputises for a DEMU. Solent Link went live during March, and DEMU substitutes became EMU before the official electrification launch. This, however, is another Crompton the day before Hedge End, the new station on the route, was ceremonially opened. Note the 3TC and its wheel flat. The Hampshire, Oxted and Berkshire units were displaced from the May timetable. Here, 29 arrives in Portsmouth during the filming of our pre-electric Solent Link cab ride. The transition to juice cost around £17 million and was officially launched by Cecil Parkinson, at the time Transport Minister. On the second day of service, a SIG works between Southampton and Fareham. Officially, the class work the new London-Victoria service, in addition to shared duties with the new 6 reps from Portsmouth via Eastleigh to Waterloo. VEPs worked the Wareham-Pompey stoppers. The 6 reps weren't a success. This early morning working was booked 12 rep, but was regularly, as on this occasion, not the booked traction. SIG 1229 leads rep 1904. The Chiltern line had a torrid year. The unreliability of the Bletchley-based Derby suburban sets led to numerous hybrids and occasionally a return to loco-hauled stock. Passengers were further inconvenienced by the engineering work associated with the complete re-signalling and remodelling of the route. Major rationalisation took place at Aylesbury, now on the Marylebone panel. 08011 survives. The oldest locomotive on BR was retained for the engineering work. The box in this view, already out of use, would vanish a few weeks later, although Aylesbury would gain another structure, a £4 million 3-road DMU maintenance depot for the Class 165 Networker turbo fleet, due to be delivered during 1991. The initial order for the class has been increased by 6 to serve the provincial-operated Oxford-Worcester service. One of the first boxes to go was at Great Missenden, although even at the beginning of the year, its operation was at peak hours only. By the end of the year, only Prince's Risborough and, to a certain extent, High Wycombe retained traditional signalling. Its total demise was due in early 1991. This is a real Marylebone route mix-and-match Class 115. The completion of deliveries of the Class 165 in 1992 will see the final elimination of heritage sets from this line. When you consider that the Sprinter revolution started well over 5 years ago, it's surprising that NSE had yet to receive its first unit as it entered 1991. Marylebone Station itself was not spared the onslaught of modernisation. In this December view, The western side of the station has been totally taken out of use. The train departing includes a Derby lightweight amongst Derby suburbans. In theory, 2-car units are only used on the service to Northolt Park. The greatest surprise during the engineering work came during September and October, when the station was closed, with Aylesbury trains terminating at Harrow on the Hill. Banbury and High Wycombe services operated from Paddington. Ironically, the terminus's last semaphore was presented to the Marylebone Cricket Club, which won a battle with the Great Central to have the original planned route changed to avoid their hallowed turf and dive into Lord's Tunnel. Hopefully 1991 will see a considerably improved service on this route. The other major remodelling in the capital came at Holborn Viaduct. The station closed on the evening of the 26th of January to make way for a new station and the realignment of the lines between Blackfriars and Snow Hill Tunnel. Holborn Viaduct had been peak hour only since the introduction of the Thameslink service. The frequent 319s descending into the tunnel beside the station, thus avoiding it. During May, the engineers introduced a blockade, terminating all trains at Blackfriars and Farringdon for a 17-day period. We returned to view the new alignment, considerably straighter than the original formation, but considerably steeper. 319011 ascends the new 1 in 29 gradient from the new St. Paul's station into Blackfriars. The benefits of the work are numerous. Not only does BR gain a modern station, but the underground formation has enabled both BR and Rosehorse Stanhope, a dealer in commercial properties, to utilize the land above the site for offices. The £150 million project has certainly been slow to get underway. Initial proposals were in 1986. The bridge over Queen Street, directly to the north of Blackfriars, was lowered 300 millimetre. The drop is visible in this shot. It is thought that the performance of the units will not be diversely affected. Most of the gradient is under cover. It may not be underground yet, but St. Paul's Thameslink is the first new underground station built since the King's Cross disaster, and has adopted many of the recommendations from the King's Cross report. St. Paul's Thameslink today, but a new name imminent? The platforms are signalled for 8-car operations, but they can actually accommodate a 12-car train. Room for expansion? Each line is bidirectionally signalled, a scissors crossing at the south end and a crossover at the north, giving flexibility. The train heads north. Note the familiar backdrop of the offices above Holborn Viaduct Station. Turnback sidings at Smithfields have also been installed inside the tunnel. The proposed Thameslink metro service may see up to 20 trains per hour using this line, in addition to initial Channel Tunnel passenger trains to King's Cross. A lively future. 319s offer no first-class accommodation, but then came the sequel, son of 319, 319/1. 26 units were progressively introduced from October. This one is on test from BREL York. Another introduction at York amongst fleets of 321s is the 322. The first of the 4-car units, painted especially for Stansted Airport, departs York with dignitaries. The 100-mile-an-hour unit was on this occasion given special dispensation to speed, 112 miles an hour down Stoke Bank. Stansted Airport, of course, is due to join the network in March 1991. The 3.3-mile extension from the Cambridge Main Line is expected to carry 8 million passengers a year. North of the electrified line to Cambridge is the, at present, diesel-worked King's Lynn line. Less than a week after this view, regular loco-hold trains were eliminated. The 2 through services were dropped in a cost-cutting exercise. NSE claimed £800,000 would be saved on locos alone in the first year. Passengers are stuck with 101s or, for a short period, buses before the line goes electric in May 1992. But will it ever see loco-hold travel again? We doubt it. The chairman of the Fan Line Users Association pointed out that the withdrawal of through trains to Liverpool Street and the disappearing buffet hardly encourages the executive passenger to commute by rail. Another May change was the introduction of DEMUs to Bristol on a daily basis, previously mentioned in the provincial section. This 205 passes Bristol East severely reduced engineers' sidings, with the 1148 returning to Southampton. DEMUs were also introduced on the Kenny Bell, taking over from Old O'Common DMUs. Although Crompton substitutes and 73s were not in conceivable traction on the Kensington Olympia to Clapham Junction trains. Unit 205033, a Berkshire, returns to Britain's busiest station with the 0733 service. Another May change, and this one of the saddest. The 50s were taken off Oxford and Newbury Network Express trains with the introduction of the 47-7s in the south. This is Hood with the 2 p.m. ex-Oxford. We close our section at Oxford, where we see 47716, Duke of Edinburgh's award. The planned introduction of 158s in Scotland committed ScotRail to losing their 47-7s to NSE and their coaching stock and DBSOs to Intercity. Fortunately, unlike the first 2 47-7s to emigrate from Scotland, 705 and 714, not all the southbound push-pull 47s lost their names. Push-pull operations ended in Scotland in May 1990 with the transfer of coaching stock to Intercity and locos to NSE. This was the scene on the Glasgow-Aberdeen service before the advent of the summer timetable. 47716 sports her pre-NSE livery. A program of replacement had already begun in the last few weeks, resulting in varied rakes of coaching stock as the ScotRail liveried Mark IIIs moved onto the West Coast route. ScotRail had planned to have 158s in service from May. However, the decision to postpone their introduction until October led to a major cascading of stock and an extended life for loco-hold services north of the border. 156s were removed from Aberdeen Inverness duties to work the Class 47-7 routes. Although the Aberdeen service seen here was virtually solid push-pull until May, the Glasgow-Edinburgh services were mainly sprinter from April, as the loco-hold stock moved south. Holyrood was the loco involved in the Polmont disaster, which of course led to cowcatchers being fitted to the DBSOs. With the exception of the Yeoman 59s, the 47-7s were the most intensively diagrammed locos on BR, averaging 2,570 tops hours per annum at up to 100 miles per hour. Although the ScotRail 47-7s did receive full overhauls before taking over duties for NSE, it shows how desperate the network was to replace Class 50s on Oxford, Newbury and eventually Exeter services. (47-716) again pushes from Edinburgh to Glasgow during the transition period. The service between the two major cities was fully sprinterised with a cascading of 156s from Neville Hill, Norwich and from the Aberdeen-Inverness route. 47s took over. 854 is seen here with the 1030X Inverness. A full feature on this line in the summer of 1990 will feature in Uk Vhs 6. The Highland Main Line also retained its loco hold workings due to the late arrival of the 158s. Although NSE had 6 47-7s on its books by the end of May, others remained in service for ScotRail on traditional duties. 711, seen here, was released from Glasgow Works after a light overhaul in 1990, wearing ScotRail livery, but without the brand names. She will probably be the last locomotive to be painted in that livery. ScotRail's loco haulage officially ended on November the 5th, 1990, with the introduction of the 158. Greyfriars Bobby gets the road. Throughout the summer, 47-4s and 47-7s were the booked traction, but here 37-707, a petroleum sector loco, works south. .37s were also used on the Glasgow and southwestern route between Ayr and Carlisle on Saturdays. This was a direct result of anticipated heavy loadings on the 1040X Ayr and 1400 return. A coal sector locomotive was hired, usually a 37, but a pair of 20s or a 26 was possible. With a service in the hands of loco and stock, the booked 156 was available for use on the West Highland line. The FEPE unrefurbished 37 departs. The lack of sprinter deliveries also resulted in a return to loco haulage on the Kyle line. 37419 is one of the few provincial-sponsored 37s. The Kyle and Far North lines were, of course, cut off in February 1989 with the collapse of the River Ness Bridge, with stranded 37s working the service before 156s were brought in by road. The completely new structure was opened on the 9th of May 1990, seen here with a 156 on a winter service. The Harbour Board is trying to sue BR for £1 million loss of earnings and damage to the riverbed, a major headache. ScotRail's real headache came to an end in November, over a year late. The 158 super sprinters took over Glasgow-Edinburgh, Glasgow-Aberdeen and Highland Main Line services. Ironically, the introduction of the 47-7s in 1979 had also been late. The delivery of 158s allowed the release of the 47-4s to Crewe for parcels work and the remaining 47-7s to NSE, so ending ScotRail's Indian summer of loco haulage. Sprinters are themselves due for replacement on the 4.5-mile branch line from Drem to North Berwick. ScotRail are utilising the East Coast mainline electrification teams in the area to create the first electrified suburban route in the east of Scotland. The conversion to juice is thought to be relatively simple. The necessary clearance under 5 bridges was being made available by slewing the line. EMUs should be regular here by the summer of '91. Note the ECML in the background. Under the wires, we view one of ScotRail's big successes. Their West Highland steam programme goes from strength to strength. Here, Lochiel Outward Bound pilots the Nelpeg K1 on a rail tour at the end of the season. Moving on, we start our Passenger Transport Authority section with the same shot. Strathclyde PTA livery now adorns a new fleet of 22 Class 320 EMUs from BREL in York, although their DOO facility caused difficulties and their initial introduction south of the river. The delivery of the 320s brought an end to the Class 311s and unrefurbished 303s. Here, refurbished Unit 303091 leads 311104. The last unrefurbished EMUs survived in Scotland until November. But watch this space. The ScotRail fleet of DMUs used on the Strathclyde-sponsored services has traditionally been a mixed bag. This spring scene sees the yet-to-be-used 158 with a 156, 101s, 107s, and, a real surprise, a Class 120. As previously mentioned in the provincial section, Metro Camel 101s were to become virtually extinct in Scotland from May, although one car did exist in a hybrid. Here, a Strathclyde liveried 3-car partners a 3-car 107 into Haymarket Sprinter Depot. The allocation of this depot would soon only be 4 heritage units, all 107s, and Eastfield would use 16 sets. The 101s went south, the intermediate trailers becoming spare at Chester. The delivery of 158s, yes, that old story, would release earlier sprinters onto suburban routes and enable BR to withdraw traditional sets. A former passenger route in the area reopened on the 27th of July. £3 million paid for a new sprinter and the reopening of Dumbreck, Corkerhill, Moss Park, Crookston and Paisley Canal stations. The line had originally closed in 1983, although it remained in use to serve Paisley Hawkhead Oil Depot. More reopenings are planned to create a northern suburban circle, the extension of the East Kilbride line, and, in the long term, the reopening of Lark Hall. From one orange PTA to the other. Well, they certainly were orange. The Metrolink scheme in Manchester is now well advanced. A mock-up of the Italian-built Ansaldo Firemer light rapid vehicles was made available for public viewing beneath the arches of Manchester Piccadilly. In the autumn of 1991, the Bury, Manchester Victoria and Cornbrook Junction to Deansgate Junction services will be taken over by these trains. At Victoria, platforms 4 to 8 will be totally excavated to make way for a right-angle bend. From there, the trams will continue through the streets. The unique Bury Line side pickup Class 504s will become history, as will Class 304s on the Altrincham line. BR will retain links with Altrincham, with their Chester services now using the reopened to passengers Northenden route, and will retain ownership of the lines between Deansgate Junction and Altrincham, where the LRT and BR will use 2 platforms each. The PTA is hopeful to retain the BR service on the Bury line for as long as possible, although a truncated service is likely before the introduction of the new 750 volts DC overhead system. Victoria will certainly never be the same again. Outside, the link between Victoria and Piccadilly is a more traditional tram route, up the streets. The system isn't going to stop there. The major interchange will be at Piccadilly Gardens, where a triangular junction will link the Altrincham and Bury routes with a line from the GMEX Centre. Plans are also underway to convert the Oldham line to Light Rapid, using the bay at Rochdale, in addition to another street system in Oldham. Manchester's neighbouring PTA, Merseyside, has had a somewhat quieter year. Here, a Manchester liveried pacer approaches Hooton. The decision was finally made in 1990 to electrify the route between Hooton, Chester and Ellesmere Port, an extension of the Merseyrail third rail system which presently ends at Hooton. Note the EMU awaiting departure for Liverpool. Already £1.6 million has been allocated by Cheshire County Council, although the local press suggested the final agreement was probably only brought about by the local by-election, where each candidate was supporting the scheme. The only new station for Merseyrail this year was at Whiston, 7.5 miles out of town on the Chat Moss route, and, unlike so many new stations, is actually staffed. A half-hourly service is provided by Liverpool-Manchester Calder Valley trains, as here, and Liverpool-Manchester stoppers. The West Yorkshire liveried 155, number 343, heads for York. Probably the most impressive new station for 1990 is at Meadowhall, built to serve the new shopping centre in Sheffield. South Yorkshire PTA provided most of the cash for this development, replacing the run-down Brightside station and transforming Winco Bank Station Junction. Here, a 142 arrives from Sheffield on the Barnsley route. An incredible 240 trains stop here daily. The official opening was on August the 30th, although Department of Transport approval for the platforms was not given until September the 5th. The advertising campaign on BR stations throughout the area has obviously been a great success. Passenger figures are significantly up on expected levels. Another new South Yorkshire station is at Swinton, reintroduced with a new link line. The Sheffield-Dearne Valley and Sheffield-Doncaster lines were linked with funds from Intercity, the PTA, and a grant from the European Regional Development Fund. 156484 arrives from Doncaster. Remaining with PTAs, we continue our tour southbound. Centro is the new name for the West Midlands PTA, still better known for their bus services, which they haven't run since bus deregulation, than their railway activities. On October the 2nd, the PTA opened Block Switch North on the Walsall-Hensford line. T312 performed the opening duties, and a similar unit is seen here. The £280,000 station is expected to cater for around 1,200 passengers a week. Trains from Hensford connect in Walsall with EMUs to Birmingham. On this route at the southern end of Bescot Yards, Central opened Tame Bridge Station. 310104 is on duty here, heading south. The £600,000 station was opened on June the 4th, 3 weeks late. This unit is in provincial midline livery. The area has been undecided about a corporate livery for over 4 years. The yellow bus livery applied to an EMU and the various shades of blue on Tisley Bubble 55033 gave way to this livery as standard. Bescott's departmental activities have been greatly increased since the announcement that the cross-city route is to be electrified. The Tisley suburban sets will be replaced with Hunslet-built Class 323 EMUs. Centro's busiest line will have 13 of these units, with electric services taking over in November 1992. 16 minutes will be cut from the present Lichfield-Redditch timings, although DMUs are expected to be working the New Street to Redditch stretch of the line until May 1993. Meanwhile, 10 Class 117s are being refurbished as a temporary measure for the line which never got sprinters. More refurbishments and, yes, the new Centro livery. The original 150-1s and 150-2s are visiting BRML Eastleigh for major overhaul, including the addition of another 10 seats. This is 150112 from the original batch of BREL deliveries. The last DMU class to be painted green were, of course, the troublesome West Yorkshire 141s. 1990 brought the announcement from the PTA that their elimination is a priority. This is an unusual pair. A 3-car 155 is likely on delivery of the PTA's Class 158 order. West Yorkshire is arguably the most pro-rail passenger transport authority. However, the DOT consented to their wish to close the line between Methley and Alltofts Junction, including Alltoft Station itself. Final closure came on May the 12th and is a result of all services being diverted via Castleford. On a more positive note, services returned to Walsden on the Calderdale route after a break of 29 years. The station, funded by the PTA, cost £240,000 and features wooden platforms. £260,000 was provided to reopen Steeton and Silsden between Keighley and Skipton, closed in 1965. The former level crossing box remains in situ, although a new road bridge has replaced the level crossing. A West Yorkshire-owned 144 arrives from Skipton. At the end of the year, this route was authorised for electrification as far as Skipton. Stage 1 would be Leeds, Shipley, Bradford, Stage 2, Bradford, Ilkley, and Stage 3 to Skipton. At Bradford, a new station has been built at Forster Square, although original access was through its derelict predecessor. Transport Minister Roger Freeman gave his credit approval for the £20 million electrification scheme in late November. The target date for EMUs is mid-1994. The terminus is now 120 yards closer to Shipley. The new platform's coming into use in June. A 142 departs. Note the Network Northwest logo behind the first door. Obviously, this unit is held together with sellotape and string. West Yorkshire already has one suburban EMU service. It came into operation in September 1990. The PTA made use of Intercity's overhead lines and replaced Pacers with ex-Network Southeast Class 307s between Doncaster and Leeds. Built between 1954 and 56, but fully refurbished, the units are regarded as temporary until newer units become available. 307-122, the first EMU to receive the crimson livery, works on the first day and represents the fourth class to sport the colour. 6 were delivered. They've worked in 3 liveries. This is Network 307-102. Initially, the PTA wanted 3 321s, but NSE would not let them jump the queue at York. The 321-5s are expected in 1991. Continuing on a West Yorkshire theme, we introduce our intercity section with the only stretch of the East Coast Main Line energized in 1990, which saw daily electric use. The short stretch of line between the east end of Leeds City Station and the servicing facilities and the maintenance depot at Neville Hill was energized on April the 20th. The introduction of 25 kV enabled the Class 91s and latterly the Suburban 307s to work under their own power ECS into the station. Here, 91007 and a full Intercity 225 rake arrive in the appalling weather of December the 8th, our cameraman taking refuge from the high winds and snow under the station canopy. Unfortunately, BR could not take such refuge, and 91 services to King's Cross were curtailed later that day. The electricity board, with power cables down everywhere, was unable to supply enough juice to BR. Preparation for electric services to Newcastle involved the complete remodelling of Central Station and the creation of 2 new platforms, 15 and 16. 43169, the National Trust, departs from one of the new platforms. At the north end of the station, the famous Diamond Crossing would disappear, and bay platforms 4, 5 and 6 were taken out of use to create more parking accommodation. The Clapham Junction disaster report delayed the re-signalling of Newcastle and as a result has put back the planned introduction of electric services to Edinburgh beyond the hoped-for May 1991 deadline. Introduction of the Mark IV style driving van trailers was preceded by 10 surrogate DVTs created from HST power cars. The buffer-fitted HSTs returned to traditional duties before the end of the year. 91008 pushes. At Doncaster, we see the new order on test. 91006 propels DVT 82204 and a short rake of Mark IVs. Intercity's order books include 314 Mark IV coaches to complement the 31 Class 91s ordered. By the end of the year, 91026 had arrived and Intercity was considering a 32nd Electra. The overall strategy for the East Coast after full electrification is for 8 HSTs, 31 Intercity 225 rakes and 2 loco haul sets for Peterborough and Grantham commuters. The Peterborough commuter traffic has been taken over from NSE and featured newly converted high-density stock. Originally, ex-ScotRail DBSOs were planned to work with the unique Class 89 or 91s. The DEBSOs didn't show. 91s working up trains blunt end first. The disappearance of the Brush 89 Avocet led to the use of 47/8s on these commuter trains. Hardly ideal. The turns include booked 100-mile-an-hour running. This is 829 heading north. The DBSOs were introduced on Liverpool Street Norwich services. Their Anglian passenger debut was preceded by driver training runs between Norwich Crown Point Depot and Manningtree. The train was turned in the triangles at each location to accumulate mileage with the driving brake second open leading. The 86, on this occasion 246, Royal Anglian Regiment, leads the scratch set of Mark IIs and DEBSO 9714 during turning. Push-pull services were due to be progressively introduced on the route from the commencement of the May timetable. In the event, the full service was not implemented until September. The combination of reworked DBSOs and 86-2s proving troublesome. This is 9705. The 13 former Scottish push-pull trailers were converted by BREL with the removal of the drafty corridor connection and general refurbishment. Devonport Dockyard was subcontracted to fit TDM, Time Division Multiplex, to make them compatible with the AC electrics. Interestingly, unlike the East Coast and West Coast operations, the locomotive is positioned at the London end of the train. This is a West Coast push-pull set. 1990 saw the order for 52 Mark III DVTs completed, enabling Intercity to introduce fixed train formations for the West Coast. West Coast stock, of course, does not work exclusively under the wires, DVTs becoming a regular sight at places such as Holyhead, Shrewsbury, Blackpool and Paignton. This train returns from the West Country resort. 1993 will see the introduction of Mark V stock onto these services. HSTs are obviously still the mainstay of intercity work in the West Country. The full electrification of the East Coast in 1991 will cascade HSTs onto cross-country routes. Weymouth will become a regular haunt of the class. As a prelude to the new service, a VIP special was run, using TSW Today and City of Plymouth from Birmingham to Dorset. Not a VIP special, but nevertheless an intercity charter. 37426, a Lion Vach, or as translated Vale of Rydal, visits a fellow narrow gauge line, the Talyllyn, itself honoured by a Class 86-2. Intercity will pull out of the Cambrian in 1991, thus ending regular loco-hauled trains. And so to the future. As work proceeds on the Channel Tunnel, RFS Industries were commissioned to build a test bed for the new TGVA bogie to be used on the high-speed link through Kent. A scrap Class 33 115 was used as the test bed, partnered by the unique RTC 40C and 73205. Here, high-speed current collection trials are being undertaken. The shoe gear is actually fitted to the Crompton, which is unpowered. The specially modified 73 London Chamber of Commerce working off the juice. Tests started in April and were scheduled to last 1 year. The Class 33 again becoming redundant. 1990 was a far better year for the Class 33s than 1989. Only 3 Cromptons were withdrawn, 057, 060 and 106. 2 were reinstated, and 33115, of course, returned in unpowered intercity guise. For some time, numerous members of the class have been rotting at Salisbury. On the 14th of September, 005, 044 and 210 would depart for the last time behind sister locomotive Sultan. This was the 8Z34-0950 departure to Cricklewood. The eventual destination for this train was Vic Berry's yard at Leicester. Even 33025 has had a checkered career. The nameplates have been returned to it. 114 was Sultan, while 025 was out of use. The train would be worked by a 47 over the Midland Main Line. This is 47201 on the down, passing 320 on the freight route. Cromptons in tow are 011, 015 and 017. Uk Vhs in fact took 9 Class 33s during 1990, although around 16 out-of-use Cromptons remain at BR sites such as Eastleigh and Ashford. On arrival at Leicester, the 33s were almost immediately cut up. The famous Uk Vhs pyramid is now coaching stock and units. The stack includes the push-pull Crompton's partners, the 4TCs, among 104s and the Great Western Exhibition train. Withdrawn locos are everywhere at present. The yards at Woodhouse Junction contain the Tinsley overflow. Most of these 47s are in store, although 014, out of use since May 1990, is looking sick. The fire-damaged Green Peak, withdrawn in February 1989, is also on site, along with a single 20. 28 of the class were withdrawn in 1990. 21 of them in a 4-week period starting in mid-September. The 3 celebrities were all in that batch. 004, the oldest mainline loco on BR, seen later in this tape, and the green pair 20064 and 20030, formerly River Sheaf and River Rother. Of the original 228 examples of the English electric Type 1s, only around 100 locos survive. The onslaught of the 60 will make 1991 the worst year to date for the class. Another class hanging on in there is the 85. 17 examples have been withdrawn by October. Intercity ECS work alongside the last Class 81s will no doubt be the last duties performed by the 85s. This engine, in fact, ended 1990 working ECS trains out of Euston. In rail freight terms, the Class 85/0 became extinct. The long-life subclass 85/1 boasting 11 examples at the end of the year, although 2 of these were in store. 1991 will almost certainly see the end for rail freight's 85s. The introduction of the Class 90s bringing about the demise of the Doncaster-built locos. In fact, the class have had an extended run due to the late delivery of Class 90s, number 36 to 50, while modifications were made to earlier members of the class. Passing a 90-style DVT heading south is a down speed link from Willesden with an Intercity 90 hauling rail freight number 044. 14 members of the class carried distribution livery, the first appearing in April. 90-050, the last of the class, completed the order in September. Throughout the summer, the RFD 90s were used daily on passenger duties, although from October this would become rare. This is 043. Rail Freight's plan is to make the West Coast's freight exclusively 90 south of Crewe, this also leading to their introduction in East Anglia. Further down the west coast, we see the Pioneer 47-401, a surprising survivor at the end of the year, although trips this far from Immingham became extremely rare. The 47 was included on a hit list at the beginning of the year. Also included were the first 56s to be condemned. 56, 002, 005, 016 and 018. This is 16. In the event, the 56 fleet remains complete, although 042 is rapidly becoming a shell in Toten's quest for spares. It was this shot that our cameraman Andrew broke his ankle for, so we had to include it. The late arrival of the 60s, 90s and 158s lessened the hit list's impact. Over 80 47s were slated for withdrawal, and 15 37s were doomed. The 37s remained intact, with only a dozen 47s switched off for the last time. 56s claimed new ground. In the south, Clacton, Felixstowe and Fen Drayton would become regular haunts. Even Cornwall saw a member of the class. 56s also became regular traction from Miller Hill Depot. Coal from Blindwells and Westfield is tripped to Miller Hill before proceeding down the East Coast main line. A pair depart the north end of the yard in foul weather. The introduction of the Class 60 has been a long drawn-out process, the slow acceptance becoming something of an embarrassment to Brush. Their Loughborough works throughout the year has been the only place to see 60s in any numbers. These views include Joseph Banks, Bow Fell, Moyle Shabod, Gludur Vawr and Wild Boar Fell. The driver training exploits of the class have been of much interest. 60005 Skiddaw making the debut for the class in Scotland. 001 and 002 would follow on a trip to the Highland main line. This was a driver training run from Moss End, but 005 had been the first to work a revenue-earning train back in December 1989. Characteristic of the driver training was the light engine movements between depots. By the time Carlisle received their Class 60, it had already visited Hither Green and March. Driver training from Carlisle was over the S&C to Hellifield, 3 times a week, initially with spare military vans, before Great Gable was dispatched light to Warrington for a rake of HEAs. Household coal wagons became the standard training load, although some of the class had outings piloting the booked train engine on a revenue-earning service, such as the Mount Sorrel to Radlett or Middleton Towers Sound train. Eastleigh's Cedar Idris, 60011, worked Eastleigh Forley tanks, piloting engines originally, then on its own. Management put a stop to that, insisting the Brush-owned engine must have its own train. She returns from Basingstoke to Eastleigh via Laverstock, with her very own rake of hoppers. On the 2nd of August, we visited Leicester Depot to view 3 of the class together. 60001 Steadfast, which first departed the Brush Works on June the 30th of the previous year, was parked beside coal sector 60004, Lochnaga. As newly delivered that day, 60024 arrived to have her coolant changed and to be sanded. Elizabeth Fry was the Great White Hope, featuring numerous modifications, including new roof ducting and buffer beam fairings. The acceptance of the class is a 5-part process. The 5th demand is that the loco must run 1,000 miles trouble-free. Elizabeth Fry nearly did it, reaching 950 miles plus before failing. 60023 did reach the target, becoming 100% owned by BR in late October, 16 months after Brush released Steadfast. The Cheviot was one of 4 locos taken onto BR's books at the time. After a few duties from Toten, such as this Mount Sorrel Radlett train, always a good bet for a 60 on test, the Cheviot would move on to Teesside with the other 3 accepted Class 60s, 17, 18 and 28. On Teesside, we see her working another revenue-earning train. The allocation of the first 20 of the class to be accepted is Thornaby 10 locos, Immingham 5 and Towton 5. By the 31st of December, only 60030 had joined the elite few owned locomotives, although around 40 had been built. The first 5 all joined the FMMY steel pool at Thornaby, regularly working the Lakenby-Corby train, and from December the Motherwell Ravenscraig Steelworks ore trains. This, of course, brought to an end the triple-headed 37s, and so starts the cascade. 20s have not long in this world. Staying in the same area, we view the Hunslet-owned Class 20s, the second privately owned stud of locos on BR. Foster Yeoman's 59s were the first. Here they make a long overdue visit to the Ferry Hill to Norton Junction freight-only line. '20 905 Iona leads with 902 Lorna bringing up the rear. The 7 Class 20/9 locos spend all summer touring the nation working the Shearings and Chipman's weed-killing trains. 1990 was the 150th anniversary for Andrew Barclay, now part of Hunslet Barclay. And despite the recession, the loco builder is thriving. During celebrations, it was revealed that the names which adorn the two-tone grey 20s belong to employees of the company. The 7th, presently unnamed 20/9, is likely to be called Jean, after Mrs. Jean Duff, the company's storekeeper. A 20 named after a Duff. Well, that's a first. As the pair disappear, you can see what we mean about an overdue visit. BR now has a third fleet of privately owned diesels active on the network. The ARC 59-1s have arrived, the 4 locos entering service 11 days after visiting Derby RTC. This is 104 on test with Mark III sleepers to assess the possibility of 75 miles an hour ARC stone trains. In Railscene's hometown, we see 59-102 on a Watley-Fareham train, previously a Class 56 duty. Built by General Motors in Toronto, the locos were shipped into Newport docks before visiting Watley, then the RTC. 1 loco would come on stream each week until the 4 were available for traffic. A comparison between this and the Class 60 fiasco is inevitable. The delivery of a second batch of 59s is a blow for British loco builders. Intercity has provided another blow by revealing that a Class 48 to replace the aging 47-8 fleet may come from General Motors. From a new loco to a new freight flow, Speedlink comes to Bodmin to serve Fitzgerald lighting via the preserved route from Bodmin Parkway. A full feature on this unique working is in Railscene 26. Not a new freight flow, but a massive boost in traffic resulted from Great Britain going to war in the Gulf. On our cab ride between Manchester and Barrow, we viewed 47292 on the Blackburn-Warrington Speedlink approaching the sidings at Exton ROF. This RFD duty has also seen new traffic from Bamber Bridge this year, although on this occasion MOD vans make up the complete train. Rail freight is a perpetually changing business, with new freight flows being created and some stalwart duties ending. Train load traffic between Fawley and Fursbrook has had one such change. You've seen the K1, now this is the Wareham kettle. The Fursbrook shunter, Paddy, fills up the driver's mug before departure. A cultural disaster. A Welsh driver based in Hampshire, and Irish shunter from Dorset. Fursbrook oil trains come to an end with the commissioning of a new pipeline to Fawley. This has enabled production to be stepped up, and as a result, more of the byproduct liquid petroleum gas has been produced. Railborne oil traffic ended in October 1990. From late November, BR started to move LPG from Fursbrook to Avonmouth, at first with Class 47s. This is petroleum allocated number 381 on empties to Fursbrook. '47s are seen as a temporary measure. BP were expecting Class 60s from the inauguration of the service, and 1991 will see the class introduced on these LPG trains. Another motive power change is amongst the most surprising. Rail Freight Metals, now renamed Rail Freight Steel, went all diesel from October. During our Manchester Barrow cab ride, we passed a pair of 37s on a southbound steel train. Previously, these freights between Moss End and North and South Wales would have been electric-hauled, the 37s taking over at Warrington. In the last week of electrified steel trains, we see 86-618 and 86-419 arriving at Warrington to be relieved by 37s. Trainload Steel had no electrics of its own and would hire locos from the other sectors to cover the duties. On this occasion, RFD and parcels. The 86-6 is in effect a restricted 86-4 and previously carried the number 418. 419 was the first of two of the class to carry the new parcels sector livery and sports second-hand nameplates. Our Civil Engineers section starts with a Parcel 73 on display at Basingstoke as part of the Winchfield celebrations in 1988. 73138 is the locomotive which was denamed, the parcel sector relinquishing its interest in Class 73s from July. The loco passed to the engineers, but it was not going to be pushed out of the limelight. Steam returned to Folkestone behind this loco. 257 Squadron's test run featuring 73 haulage, although at times such as this, a push-pull combination was resembled. The working had been to turn the Bullard Pacific for the following day's Battle of Britain festivities in Folkestone. The NSE 73 would pilot on that occasion. The following day, both the Network 73 seen earlier and 257 Squadron would have naming ceremonies. One great loss in 1990 has been a repaint for Eastleigh, seen here in happier times. .33008 was repainted initially in general user grey before gaining the Dutch hybrid livery. Here she works with sister engine 114 on the Eastleigh-Meldon ballast diagram, with no traffic on this occasion. The engineers have announced a reprieve for the class and their fellow BR and CW Scottish counterparts, the 26. CEM overhauls will mean up to 10 years more life for the classes. Wearing the new Dutch livery, 057 partners 103 on the same working. 057 had been condemned in February, but repairs were sanctioned and she rides again. The Dutch livery, named after its resemblance to that worn by Nederlandse Spoorwegen locos and stock, gave the engineers a unique identity. The first 37 to carry the livery was 158, seen here on test between BRML Doncaster and Newcastle. This was a works repaint, although most of the repaints were carried out at depots. Continuing on a Dutch theme, the civil engineers took the opportunity to display their varied stock at King's Lynn during the West Anglia Gala Day. 37196 was used on the shuttles to Cambridge, whilst static exhibits included the rare but still used ex-Great Western Pollen E. Another surprise was the appearance of the first Dutch Class 73, although at the time mechanically incomplete. 31541 was the prototype for the livery. At Cambridge, the engineers provided a Dutch 47, rare at the time. Parked amongst the exhibits, the multiple-fitted Class 47-9 was upstaged by a 47-4 from the parcels sector. A significant proportion of the parcels sector locomotives in stock received servicing at Cambridge, and in recognition of this, 47462 was duly christened Cambridge Traction and Rolling Stock Depot.
Mr. Jack Thurman to come forward and unveil the plaque. Mr. Thurman.
Yes, every naming ceremony has one. As with the previous year, numerous specials were run. The highlight for us was the Class 20s to Fen Drayton. (20.047) partnered 004, the oldest mainline diesel on BR, dating from 1957. It was withdrawn 2 weeks later. Amazingly, crossing gates survive where the branch crosses the A10. The gala day suffered from a lot of weather. A downpour caught us out at Histon, resulting in the failure of our viewfinder. These scenes at Ely were filmed blind. 73103 and 73129, City of Winchester, work the down Fenman. .73s, of course, often work with EMU stock, but rarely with 310s. NSE apparently have no available coaching stock. At the previous year's gala, EMUs had also been used in a locohold guise, the first regular electrics to King's Lynn. Back at King's Lynn, the Class 56 and 310 combination of the previous year was again repeated. Construction 56065 departs. King's Lynn was certainly active. The normal DMU service ran as usual, supplemented by the enthusiast trains. On the branch to Middleton Towers, Class 37s top and tailed with another 310. This is one of the last trains of the day after sunset, although we are not sure the sun ever appeared. 5,250 horsepower seems a little excessive, but the locos were returning home. Dutch 37196 piloted the Middleton Towers pair 218 and 354. trio of liveries, one from engineers and two from the construction pool. We are grateful to the BR staff who marshalled the Dutch 37 on the front for the benefit of the Railscene candles. 3 weeks later was the Network Northwest Gala, featuring loco-hauled services to Barrow-in-Furness. The only loco to work from Manchester to Cumbria on its own was this Immingham 37. This was the 0558 Liverpool Lime Street to Barrow service. Do 37 bashers never sleep? Cark and Cartmel is a notorious spot in the autumn for leaves on the line. We were hoping for a slip, but the driver was obviously an old hand. The gala was something Network Northwest should not be proud of, with excessive late running and a total lack of information at BR booking offices. As a result of this, we missed the 85 and 90 combination to Altrincham. Running 57 minutes late, 26025, returns to Manchester with 31434. The Class 31s were required to heat the train, the 26, 20s and 56 incapable. The late running was mainly due to single-line working over the Leven Viaduct at Arnside. Here, coming off the viaduct wrong road, 56035, a Toten construction machine, pilots celebrity Brian, Severn Valley Railway. In association with Gloucester Rail Day, Pathfinder Rail Tours ran special services between Bristol and Birmingham. This is Ogmore Castle, Castell Ogwr. The Canton-based 56 heads for Gloucester. Motive power also included Class 20s, a 58 and a plethora of 37s. Raising the dust at Ashchurch are 691 and 800. Centrepiece of the gala was at Gloucester, where virtually every BR class had been assembled for the open day. This is 58004, Bristol bound. The event, to celebrate 150 years of railways in the town, attracted around 10,000 visitors and raised approximately £8,000 for charity. 58s on passengers are not exactly common. Equally uncommon is BR taking the opportunity to encourage railway enthusiasts to spend more money on rail travel by rostering interesting motive power. Fortunately, in October 1989, Provincial took the initiative on the S&C. In February 1990, they repeated the operation. Freight engines piloting the usual 47s. 58036 made a debut for the class over the S&C. 47456, the train engine, remained on hand to heat the coaches and assist if necessary. One of two major surprises was Provincial's use of the privately owned Killer 20s. Hunslet Barclay owned Iona and Georgina head north. The other surprise, for many one of the highlights of 1990, was the use of the Holbeck training machine, ADB 968027. And here she is on test, Tamworth Castle. Holbeck fitters worked in their own time to return the Class 25 to its former glory. Her last revenue-earning work was in March 1987, but on this train she is earning around £10,000 for provincial. Green was certainly the in colour on the S&C that day. In addition to Tamworth Castle's return, Union of South Africa, or is it Osprey, was heading south. February also saw the debut of the new Train Tours charter set over the line. We visited the Hull Loco Preservation Society Group's headquarters to see the final touches put to this remarkable livery. Green is the house colour of Pilkington Glass, who sponsored the refurbishment. The train's S&C debut was in disgusting but typical S&C weather. A parcel sector 47 is in use here on rail tour duty. As the train passes, note the K formed by the blue and red stripes. This was to promote Pilkington's K glass, the set rapidly becoming known as the Special K set. Later in the year, Tamworth Castle returned to the area on the Rystone Cowboy rail tour featured in our opening sequence. Here she departs Settle Junction, having lost her pair of 31s. Hertfordshire Rail Tours certainly took advantage of D7672's new lease of life, also booking her for trips to Scarborough and over Copypit. Unfortunately, at the end of the year, Rail Freight decided it could no longer sponsor Tamworth Castle. The Loco's only hope would be to join Intercity. Intercity, of course, has long been the last bastion of the rat. 1990 was supposed to be the last year of the Ethels. This is Ethel 3 during a shunt for Clan Line in December. By this time, she should have been redundant, but the new generator van needed to provide ETH on steam rail tours did not appear until February 1991. 35028 was waiting to return to crew. In the Cheshire Railway town, another Class 25, a Dean Forest native, was named at the open day. Also on site was the crew-built 47192, now returned to its original livery and restored as D1842. She normally resides at the town's Heritage Centre. At the end of the day, passing the heritage site, we view another 47 on an interesting working. Returning home is a train of Central Line stock. In the aftermath of the King's Cross fire report, London Underground Limited commissioned the BREL works at Crewe and Derby to undertake safety modifications to this stock. Railscene cover relatively few open days each year. The actual movements in association with the event are, for us, much more interesting. This is Tinsley's Open Day, in the depot's Silver Jubilee year. Notable visitors included the First Class 59 Yeoman Endeavour. The depot was served by a bus and train service from Sheffield Midland. Among the traditional DMUs was this reworked 141. Enthusiast operations for this class are rare, and so is mileage over freight-only metals. More open-day shuttles served the Colville exhibition, working between Birmingham, Burton, Leicester and Derby. As you can see, the line suffers mining subsidence and resembles a roller coaster in places. Tyseley DMUs were used to the depot's 10th and provisionally last open day. In fact, 1991 will see a repeat. At the end of the day, the exhibits were returned to their home depots. Here, a pair of Thornaby-based Metals 37s lead another member of the class, Tamworth Castle and Gordon Highlander. The full feature of this open day was included in News Views 5, including the edited highlights of a cab ride on the Colville and Culverton Caboodle rail tour, seen here. Traction on the Hertfordshire trip to Colville had been a single Class 58. The passengers were given the opportunity to view the open day before proceeding behind 56078 from the construction sector via Burton, Stanser and Sheet Stores to Nottingham. In the station, another construction 56 was added before the train continued to Calverton. Here, the rail tour returns from the colliery with 070 bringing up the rear. Another 56 is seen working the Teesmaid, a Pathfinder tour. Yorkshire Coal Sector 56123 Drax Power Station leads with local 37's Teesside Steelmaster and British Steel Teesside bringing up the rear. Continuing with top and tailing, this is the Growler Group's Gwent Growler departing Ebbw Vale. Engineers 37 number 141 leads with a Tinsley Speedlink 37298 on the rear. The Yorkshire depot is adding unofficial aircraft names to its 37s. 298 is Victor. The appearance of two blue locos on a full rake of blue-grey stock has a certain 1970s look about it. This could only be the 1990s. The Branchline Society Tyne and Tees Wanderer 2 featured intercity stock and parcel sector Class 47, numbers 474 Sir Rowland Hill and unnamed 533 on a 12-coach train, lost in the edit. The tour covered numerous northeast freight-only lines, top and tail style. It certainly is becoming the vogue. Our final sector is parcels. In the 150th anniversary year of the postage stamp, a double naming was performed on May the 1st. 90019 was named Penny Black at Euston, and 47474 became Sir Rowland Hill at Kidderminster. This was the official unveiling of the new locomotive livery. Sir Rowland Hill is widely regarded as the pioneer of today's postal service. 15 Class 47s were to carry the livery by the end of the year. This is 47522 Doncaster Enterprise, arriving from Chester. This loco was a former celebrity when it wore the unique LNER apple green parcels livery. It received a repaint after collision damage. Rare mileage for a parcels train was the S&C. Brutes were taken to Carlisle for repair on 2 weekends. Here, 47488 rail riders returned south to Birmingham. This was a Sunday working. 1990 saw an end to all weekend post office duties. Also to go were the Class 128 and 114 diesel parcel units. The introduction of the October timetable has rendered them surplus to requirements. After a mixed pair depart Norwich Depot, we view a 2-car 114 on the return Lancaster parcels. The decision was a great surprise. Many of the units had only been re-engined the previous year. A return to loco-hauled vans prevailed. Exactly the scenario the DPUs had replaced. And so to 1991. News items to come will include the tragic loss of Speedlink services, the introduction of HSTs to Poole and perhaps Holyhead, the full electrification of the East Coast Main Line, the continued spread of sprinterization, D400 and, upon delivery of more Class 60s, the demise of the Class 20. Keep in touch with Railscene and Rail, the best modern image coverage.